Hi, this is Matt. Today I wanted to walk through replacing a plastic dated skylight with a new deck-mounted self-flashed glass skylight. So you can see here, this is a late 80s vintage plastic skylight that we had in our garage. We had tarred this thing so many times. This was way past the service date. You can see that this is curb mounted. So we have this curb or this lip built up around the skylight, and then the plastic would come down over that curb on top. One of the issues with these skylights, one, the plastic skylights don't last that long. They're not great quality to begin with. They're very inexpensive. And number two, the curb installation is essential. And the way that you flash or add metal flashing around that curb to tie into the asphalt shingles is quite difficult. And the installation needs to be perfect for these not to leak. So these tend to be leaky skylights in a lot of older homes that were built in the 90s. In our case, this is way past the service date. This was in for 32 years, and we just had leaking problems all the time. And no matter how much we tarred around this, we could never get this to stop leaking. Over here, we did have another leak in the garage roof as well that we had tarred temporarily. And you can see the shingles are pretty deteriorated here. So this roof is in need of replacing as well. And we're not ready to replace this quite yet. But what we did want to do is make sure that the structure of the house was protected as much as possible. So this is a very inexpensive DIY approach to replacing this window to make sure that it's both good looking, but also protecting the house, which is really our primary concern. So looking at the unit that we put in here, you can see that this is a self-flashed skylight, meaning everything around here comes with the unit. So all of the flashing is integrated together with the skylight. There's no need for a curb. Gives you a lower installation mount clearance as well for the look. This is double insulated glass, argon filled, tempered, so a substantial cut above what was in the window existing. The way you install these, as I mentioned, you just have a hole in the deck, and then this comes straight down on top with either butyl sealant or 3 individual beads of silicone caulking, 100% silicone. Then it screws down. These screws do come with the skylight, which wasn't completely clear from the listing. And then you seal around again and mate right up to this with the shingles. I'm including these roof jacks just because they're quite inexpensive and they make the job a lot easier if you're on a steeper roof. Ours is an 11-12 pitch, so we really needed a nice wide plank to walk back and forth on while we were installing. Ladders are too difficult to work on here. And I ended up using the roof jack system most of the time I was working. It made the job a lot easier. So I would recommend these, along with any fall protection that you need for your roof, just to be safe while you're working the job. This was some damage we had to the skylight, and this does appear to be pretty common from the comments at Home Depot, who sells this particular model. The corner styrofoam protectors get broken in shipment, and as soon as they're broken, they can no longer protect the metal, and so the metal gets bent. In our case, we were able to bend this back with a vise to make sure that it's flat, but having this flat is pretty crucial to making sure you have a good fit on the roof. So you really want to make sure that your skylight is in good shape, and if it's not, be prepared to reject it and get a replacement from the manufacturer. You can see here just how bad this skylight was and how there was no way we ever could have saved this completely or protected it from leaking. So you can see here as you look at the skylight, here's the actual edge of the skylight. This was the way that this was flashed in at the time with spare pieces of shingles, which is not the right way to do it. And there's no way that moisture was going to not intrude through this. You're always going to get leaks coming in around these edges. So even if the top is completely sealed, water will always find its way in. So we really needed to get this thing out of there. There was no way it was not going to leak. Here's just some more pictures around the edges. And again, the install calls for you both to remove the skylight, which in our case just consisted of mostly prying. We were able to get this out with a lot of reciprocating saw cutting. Once the skylight's out, you need to strip the shingles back on each side and the top and the bottom in order to have a nice clean surface to mate the new skylight. In our case, the skylight is smaller, so we also needed to rough in the new opening and do some decking repair. You can see here, because of the leaking issues that we've had here, we've had a bunch of this sheathing has deteriorated. So be prepared when you're doing this job to replace a good portion of the decking. We actually had to make a mid-trip run back to Home Depot because we had a little bit of spare decking, but not enough for the amount of damage that we had. Minimum install calls for 7/16 OSB. That is what we used because this was a relatively small area. Normally I would use 1/2-inch plywood, but in our case, the OSB, especially with lumber prices being high, was much easier for us to get. So you can see we've removed these areas of bad decking in preparation for the new. This is just a cover over the window. We had to let it go overnight. So this is just to protect from bugs, light, air intrusion. We were scheduled to have no rain. So if you think this job is going to take you more than a day, it took us about 2 with all of the prep work and the installation. Make sure you pick a patch of clear weather. And then you can see here at the bottom just the roof jacks that we were working on. Here's the hole as we have it covered in with new 7/16 OSB all the way around with the new roughed-in opening. You can see on the bottom here, I used some extra self-adhesive flashing we had. This is like ice and water shield. This is better stuff than regular tar paper. In the rest of it, we just used 30-pound felt because that's what we had to piece in the rest. And you can see these are all new shingles. You will have to do patch-in work with shingles. If you have some that match your existing roof, that's always the best. We did, but not enough to do this entire job. So again, I'm going to stress, this was really a job for function. You can never get an exact match with shingles, which is one reason roofers hate doing these kind of patch-in jobs. We had to go buy a bundle of shingles for $38. They are not even close to color matching. It's what we could get at the time to close in the roof. This faces the back of our yard. We were relatively unconcerned with this because we know we have to replace the entire roof in the next 5 years. But just something to be aware of. If you don't have shingles that match your roof, spend some time to try to get the best match you can because it will be pretty visible. Here's the opening as it's ready. Again, I used self-adhesive ice and water shield around just to make sure that if any water ever did get under there, the wood is protected as much as possible. What you're going to do as the install, again, we used silicone, is go all the way around this with 3 3/8 beads of silicone, kind of in expanding concentric rings here. Then the whole skylight is going to come down on top. And to get straight and true, you're going to mark your edges here, which is explained in the instructions. And then when the skylight is placed, you can make sure that your lines are lined up with the edges of the skylight. Here it is prepped for the install. You'll see you want to have your shingles coming all the way up to the bottom of the opening. This is where the lip is going to cover. And then once this is on, then you can continue patching in your shingles all the way around. You can see we did a pretty large area here. This is much larger than what's called for. Because so much of the roof was bad, we wanted to just replace the shingles while we were there. So we went up, I think, 4 courses right where the roof jack is, 4 courses up from the bottom, several courses from the top, and then quite a bit on each side just to get all of that old rotten shingle out of there. This is the silicone that I used. This is just a GE 100% silicone. I think it was one or two steps up from the cheapest, window and door, outdoors rated, lifetime warranty versus 40 or 50. I actually don't know, and there are probably YouTubes out there that discuss at length all of the differences between the 100% silicones and the different ratings. The thing I liked particularly about this one was 30 minutes rain ready because we had some weather coming. So I wanted to make sure that if we got this thing in and it rained an hour or two later, that we weren't going to have any issues. So here it is actually installed, placed down from the top. You can see there's a bit of a greenish tinge to it. That's the low E coating that prevents sun from heating up the room in the summertime. After the install, the instructions do call for a bead all the way around the edges and on top of every single fastener. And you really want to take your time here and not rush this because this is going to be in there for a long time, ideally. The last thing you want this to do is leak through one of these fastener points because this is the penetration through your flashing, the weak point. It's going to be covered by shingles, but if ever water gets under there, you want to make sure that every one of these is sealed as well as possible. So again, seal every fastener, seal every edge. Really take your time if you're using silicone. With the butyl sealant, they actually call for you to do a complete coat on top of this as well on all 3 edges, which we showed briefly in the previous picture. This is showing it after install, and as we started to piece the shingles in, this is the best picture I have of what it would look like if we had a complete color match to our shingles. These were all shingles that we had saved from, I should say my father had saved from when he built the house in the garage 30 plus years ago. So these were still valid, they were still good. We used these to piece in, they match quite well on the shingles that are there. They're obviously much newer and not weathered. But every shingle after this, which is where we ran out, you'll see in later pictures is not even close to a color match. But we really cared more about the function in this case. Here's a view of it from the inside. So you can see we framed in that opening. You've got a white wood trim that trims all the way around the inside of the skylight. There's way more light than there was with the old acrylic skylight. So much more sun gets through this. It's so clear on a nice sunny day. I took this picture when it was raining, but even in the rain, it's amazing how clear this is. Here was our system. We had kind of a scaffold set up along with our roof jacks and ladders because the roof is so steep. And you can see here how the shingles that we got from the bundle aren't even close to color matching. However, we're still very happy that this is functionally protected. You can see how far this extends out to each side just because we did have more shingle damage. On a traditional install, if your roof is in good shape, you only need to come out to about here for the instructions. Basically, 1 tab of an existing shingle would probably do it. Okay. And I did want to show one issue that we've been having, which comes down to condensation. So the window works great, not a single leak. We have had an incredibly wet couple of months after we put this in the fall. 0 leaks. It's so refreshing to not have to worry about this window. The actual thermal insulation of the glass is exceptionally good. I'll show some pictures with snow in a minute. However, in the cold, there is condensation that builds up around the edge of this, underneath where the wood trim is here. You can see this is actually frost. Now, there's no condensation in the room. It's actually quite dry since we have electric baseboard heat in this bathroom. So the air is quite dry, not humid. This is strictly a temperature differential, and what happens is the heat bleeds through from the outside. And I want to show in a cross-section why that's happening in a minute. But you can see here from this picture, this is snow on the window. So as far as insulation goes, the window is doing a great job. We'll actually have snow on there for several days. It really has to melt from the sun, so heat is not escaping. With the old acrylic skylight, heat just bled through that, and the skylights would constantly be clear because the heat was bleeding out from the house and melting the snow. This one, night and day, huge difference. So now let's take a quick look at this. You can see here on the install, this is a cross section of the window, and I have another one as well. You can see here, this is the actual window itself. This is the frame, this is the flashing. You can see here, this is all metal. And then this is where it mates into the wood on the inside trim. So the R value in this cross section here is extremely minimal. And what you're getting is when this metal gets cold, especially when it's say 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside or colder, which it has been here, we hit -20. This is obviously going to transmit not through movement of air, convection, but through conduction, right? This is cold. It's pulling the cold into this inner surface here, which is actually just barely on the inside lip of where the deck is mounted. And so that's the problem here that's happening. So I want to show this in another couple of pictures so people can be aware. And jump down to this cross section here, and you can see it better in this real life version here, but here's your wood. And here's this little metal piece, which is where you were seeing the condensation and frost build up on the inside of our window. Now, the real question is, can you fix this? I think the answer is no. The company does tell you, as does Velux, by the way. I think this is a Velux document. If you put drywall directly up to the wood trim, it helps reduce condensation issues. If you leave a gap, they want you to cover this gap with trim, like a quarter round trim, wood trim around the edges, to create kind of a buffer zone between the warm, moist air in the house and the cold that's being driven in through that metal and the wood. However, at least in my case, I did install a test patch of drywall directly butted up to this wood trim, and I still saw moisture issues. So my recommendation here, and what I'll be doing to trim this out, is I will be leaving a gap and then installing a quarter round piece of trim around these edges, just to ensure that any moisture or frost that gets in there as it melts and drips out, there's a wicking agent in this window that helps pull moisture out if you do get excessive moisture. And I haven't actually noticed any drips in the bathroom. That moisture typically all dissipates. But you can see from this last photo here, I wanted to give a really good overview. Here is the area of issue. So that little lip here that protrudes into the house opening, you can see they've got a mating surface driven straight up to this wood. In my case, when I attempted this, I did have some moisture bleed through here as the very, very cold air pushed here, and this is very hot on this side. That quarter inch or half inch of drywall that you have here is not enough of a temperature barrier to completely prevent condensation from pushing its way through at this edge. So I would recommend here leaving a gap and installing some kind of a trim piece in between. And I do want to show this as a visual. Ignore that flashing there, that's temporary. So here's a nice deep snowfall on the roof. You can see that we have a lot of snow going up onto the top of this skylight, and that's not melting. The glass is doing a great job of preventing across this very large open surface of that heat escaping out. The only place you've got heat escaping is around the very edges of this skylight, which again, jumping back this one picture, is just this small area here where the heat is going to come through this little piece of wood, which probably has an R value of 0.5, and it's escaping through this gap here. So your only heat loss is in this area right here. This entire cross section, the insulated glass, argon filled, all that is doing a great job and has been doing a great job of keeping in heat, keeping out the summer heat when we do have warm days, allowing in a lot of light. And really, it's been a great window overall and a huge upgrade to what we had previously. Now, just to jump back, I did note this window, at least in this size, was $168 with free shipping. So you can also get larger units for sub $200 in this line. So between this and the silicone caulking, and even including the roof jacks, our total overall cost was very low. We're talking around $200, plus the bundle of shingles that we needed, which was another $38. So for a very small amount of money and about 2 days of effort, we did a full replacement on this plastic skylight, 32 years old, leaked like crazy, causing structural damage to the inside of our ceiling and the garage space, which is finished. And we were able to completely transform it with this new glass, very nice looking skylight with a nice low profile. And because it's self-flashing, the install is very, very simple. You just need a deck opening, a hole in your roof with good solid roof decking that's ready to accept the new window, and then shingle right up to the edges as it's called for. But moisture-wise, no more leaks. Heat-wise, it's doing a great job keeping in the heat other than around the edge. And my only qualm with this window is that bit of condensation around the edges, which again, haven't been an issue. We haven't had any leaks or any drips. So my caution to anyone looking at doing an install like this, make sure you get a self-flashed unit. Make sure you get a really high-grade silicone or butyl sealant if you're comfortable with that. Make sure that when you remove the skylight, you replace all of the rotten decking. If you've had any roof leaks, and you probably will have if you have a plastic skylight, be sure to replace it with good wood before you put the new down. Put on fresh tar paper or whatever you're using for a roof barrier, and then make sure that you're square when you're lining up your skylights so that everything looks good. But We've been very happy with this. It was very low cost. And I had a lot of interest in this from friends and family who saw the project and wanted to know more details. So I thought it would be interesting to do a short video on this just to put this out there and let people see how we did this for a very low cost. If you do have any questions or comments, just put them down below. I'll try to answer all of them. And thanks for watching.